Welcome into Locked On Phillies. Today, we continue with a couple of our recurring segments. Who are the Miami Marlins going to target this offseason, and how does it affect the Philadelphia Phillies? We'll do a player review for one, Jose Alvarado, and then we'll respond to Off the Poll, where we asked, how much do you care about Bryce Harper's delay in his elbow surgery? So much to break down on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is indeed Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas, former collegiate and semi-pro baseball player, pitcher. So people say not player, pitcher, because they like to separate the pitchers and position players. Been talking Phillies baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio, NBC Sports Philadelphia on television, and happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Hopefully you had a lovely holiday last week with Thanksgiving on Thursday. Lovely holiday weekend. Cyber Monday now, so maybe you got me on in the background while you're doing a little shopping online. A lot of fun stuff going on because we're into the holidays right now. So one of the great times of the year, despite the weather. But actually the weather here in Philadelphia, if you're in the Philadelphia area while you're listening to it, has been unseasonably warm, which is perfect for me because I hate the cold. But enough about the weather. This isn't Locked On Weather. This is Locked On Phillies. And we've been doing something recently where we look around the NL East and we look at the competitors and what they're looking to do this offseason, because we've pretty much in depth broke down what the Phillies are looking to do this offseason as we await for news and things of that nature to come down that affect the Philadelphia Phillies more than things that we've already heard from around baseball, which is not too much at this point in the offseason. Well, we might as well learn a little bit about our competitors and what their goals are. So we already did the Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets. So we went in order of the finish in the division. And now the Phillies obviously finished in third. In fourth were the Miami Marlins. So let's go ahead and jump into what would be a successful Miami Marlins offseason and how it affects the Philadelphia Phillies and what they're looking to do. Now, the first one is something, and I'm looking at an article here just so I can give proper credit, from Fish Stripes and SB Nation Marlins community. So there's an article about what would be a successful Miami Marlins offseason and a whole bunch of plans and moves and everything like that. So this is the research I did to get you this information. But the first thing that they have listed here is raise the payroll. And it's going to be tough because nobody goes to the Marlins games, even when they're good, even when they're a playoff team. Well, that's a little unfair. I was going to say, even when they were a playoff team in 2020, no one went to their games because they couldn't, Connor, you idiot. But it's hard to tell the difference between a 2020 Marlins stadium down there and a 2022 Marlins stadium. It's that empty all the time. And it's crazy. They're terrible in attendance. The market is not interested in the team all that much. And I don't know how you compete. They have a really tough time to do that. So it's going to go ahead and you're going to look at their ownership to have to spend a bunch of money. That's the only way they'll ever compete in this division. And frankly, it doesn't sound like the person who wrote this article is very optimistic it'll happen. And the Phillies are going to largely outspend the Marlins again, which means you shouldn't have to worry about that gap from fourth to third getting any smaller. The next thing down here, acquire a center fielder. Now, the Miami Marlins need a lot of help in a lot of different spots, but they had kind of a rotating door at center field this past year. Jesus Sanchez was out there. Brian De La Cruz was out there. Both young players who just aren't really everyday major league caliber center fielders, frankly. I don't know. It's just they're where the Phillies were, and the Phillies were in better shape because Odubel Herrera, he stinks, but he would be a better option, or I guess the Odubel Herrera like a couple years ago would be a better option in center field than what the Miami Marlins shot it out there last year. But it's kind of like with the Phillies where it would be Odubel Herrera, and then he'd get hurt or do something stupid, and then Roman Quinn would go out there and he'd immediately get hurt, and then Matt Vierling would be out there for a couple games, and who knows who would be out there playing center field. It's tough to find that lockdown center fielder. Brian Reynolds is still available as an outfielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It would be via trade, would be via free agency, but there's also some outfield options in free agency. Let's look at Michael Conforto. Maybe he's priced himself too low for some of the big teams that think it's worth it to even give him a contract. With the Miami Marlins could look at him to go play outfield. I don't know. But the center field position, just outfield in general for the Marlins, is a point of interest. That's good for the Phillies because the Phillies aren't interested in the center fielder. Brandon Marsh is going to be here for a long time. So it's a point that the Marlins are interested in that the Phillies are not, which means it's more opportunity for the Phillies to attack players that they want. So issues there in center field. The next thing listed down here is balance the lineup. So I'll read you this. The Marlins were far and away MLB's least effective team in 2022 at scoring against left-handed pitching. Now, what that says to me about the Philadelphia Phillies is, well, go ahead and give Bailey Falter opportunities against the Miami Marlins whenever you get a chance and bring in a veteran lefty as one of the guys that you sign in free agency. But it also just says the Miami Marlins are just bad in general. Like Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola can handle them even though they're not left-handed. Clearly, Nola had some of his best starts this year against the Miami Marlins and even in Miami. So that's kind of an overarching concern. I guess you got to bring in righties who hit lefties well, but that's not an easy thing either to balance the lineup. So I don't even know how you attack that in an individual player basis if you're the Miami Marlins. So that's a problem. And then the bottom one is keep Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez because they're their only untouchable players. Alcantara is Cy Young guy. Like he is Cy Young caliber pitcher and repeatedly so. And then Yuri Perez is still a young player. Don't know what he's going to be at the major league level, but a really, really, really good prospect. And here's the overarching theme of the Miami Marlins as opposed to the Mets and the Braves and what we've already talked about with the Phillies. I'll read you through these again. Raise the payroll. Acquire a center fielder because you have no idea who's good in your outfield. Balance the entire lineup and only have two guys who are untouchable, one guy who's not even really a regular major leaguer yet. You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like when you're looking at repairs to a house and where the Braves and Mets and Phillies are fixing a broken window or putting in a new light fixture, the Miami Marlins foundation is cracked. It's like, yo, you gotta raise this foundation and do a whole bunch. I don't know. I'm not a person who goes through. I'm not a construction worker or an engineer or anything like that. So I don't want to get too deep into the house talk because someone would be like, that's not what you do when you flip a house. But that house needs to be flipped. And there's a huge gap still between the Miami Marlins and the Philadelphia Phillies. And if you're, for whatever reason, I don't know why you would be, but if you were worried about the Miami Marlins potentially trying to close that gap a little bit in 2023, maybe they will buy a game or two, but they're absolutely nothing to be worried about. There's a lot darker days for the Marlins before they come out on the other side. And that's good news for the Phillies because even though you play your division less times this coming season, the easier the games can be against your division, they're weighted more now, the better off for the Philadelphia Phillies to compete with the likes of the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves, even though the Atlanta Braves and Mets also get to play the Marlins. So I wish the division was a little more competitive in general, but this is a situation, and that's crazy for me to say, right? Someone's ripping their hair out. Are you saying the NL East needs to be more competitive than they were last year when they had 200-win teams and a team that went to the World Series? And, well, the bottom of the division was pretty bad, so I guess it could have been more balanced. But you're right. The NL East is a tough division. The Marlins and the Nationals, who we will talk about on tomorrow's program, not exactly part of that, the skill in the division, I'll say. So a good sign for the Philadelphia Phillies when you look at the plan for success for the Miami Marlins offseason. Now, coming up, we're going to jump into another player review. We're going to head to the bullpen for the first time, and we're going to discuss Jose Alvarado. What a season the lefty had. And where do I grade him out? Because, wow, there were points where he was absolutely incredible this year. And then, well, we know how the season kind of ended. We'll discuss coming up next as we continue Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at betonline.net because betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. You got football, Eagles 10-1. So I'm repping my Eagles shirt today, my Eagles sweatshirt. Football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, it's player review time. And that player that we're reviewing today for the 2022 season is one Jose Alvarado. Now, Alvarado had a very interesting 51 innings pitched in the 2022 Philadelphia Phillies season. Just to give you the overarching numbers like we have for the starting pitchers that we've already went through and reviewed, a 3.18 ERA, you take that every time out of the bullpen. Maybe for an elite arm, you'd like to see that a sub 3, but that's, I feel, nitpicky. 3.18 for a guy, especially with the command that he has, or the lack of it sometimes, is something that's really, really nice to see. His career ERA is 3.57 over 6 years at the major league level. So you're looking at a sub-average. His ERA was lower than average, which is a good thing. I'm trying to say that without saying it was a below average year, which doesn't make sense. As far as strikeouts, 81 strikeouts in 51 innings. That's absolutely preposterous. 14.3 strikeouts per 9. Dude was a strikeout machine this year. As far as walks to strikeouts, not as good. A 4.2 strikeout to walk ratio, which means if you are quick at math, you might be able to figure this out, but I'll just tell you. He walked 24 batters this year. Now, that's not great. That 4.2 was walks per 9. I sincerely apologize. Strikeout to walk ratio was 3.38. 24 walks to 81 strikeouts. I'll just read you his numbers last year in 2021. 68 strikeouts in 55 2/3 innings pitched. So 13 less strikeouts in 4 2/3 more innings. 47 walks. So we had 23 less walks this year. The command was so much better. I know he looks wild sometimes in specific appearances, but man, he cut his walks almost in half from the 2021 season, and he added 13 more strikeouts in 4 less innings. It was a huge step forward for Jose Alvarado, and you're looking at a player that's only 27 years old. 27. Like, you can have him with this team for another 4 or 5 years, probably really, really effectively. So Jose Alvarado, a strong season, and how you get there matters. Remember, he got sent down earlier in the year. Jose Alvarado was sent down to the minor leagues because he was really, really struggling, and the bullpen looked awful, and the team was terrible, and this, that, and the other thing. And then when he gets his opportunity and gets called back up, he just becomes one of the best relievers in baseball, one of the best lefty relievers in baseball. Flamethrower, unhittable, nasty stuff. He's throwing like it's crazy. He's throwing 102. He's throwing like 97-mile-an-hour cutters. Dude, I don't know how you hit this guy. If you're a left-handed hitter, this is going to sound dumb. If you are a normal left-handed hitter, he's got to be one of the most impossible pitchers to face. Got to be. Can't be fun to face Jose Alvarado as a lefty. And yet that brings us to our seminal moment of the year. For Jose Alvarado, it's not a good one. It's the home run against the Houston Astros in Game 6 of the World Series in Houston. Yordan Alvarez takes him deep after Zach Wheeler gets pulled early in the game by Rob Thompson. And that's basically where the Philadelphia Phillies season died right there. It was not a great outing by Jose Alvarado. And that's what people are going to remember about his 2022, which is a shame because he was one of the best relievers in baseball this year, especially after facing adversity. He's like the relief pitching version of Alec Bohm, where he had major issues earlier and then came back and was really, really, really good. Not that Alec Bohm was the best third baseman in baseball by any stretch of the imagination, but you get what I'm saying there. And then you have a moment where on the biggest stage in the biggest game, you end up throwing the pitch that leaves the yard that basically costs your team the chance to win a World Series. And that's not a fair way to look at it, I don't think. I lean more towards that Rob Thompson put Jose Alvarado in a situation he should have never had to be in. Zach Wheeler was dominating. When you take guys who are dominating out of the game, it builds confidence for the opponent and it puts the relief pitcher you're bringing in a really, really tough spot because you could be prime Mariano Rivera, but mentally, if guys feel like they just got relief because some guy was taken out of the game that they absolutely couldn't hit, anyone looks more hittable sometimes than a pitcher who's going well, especially a pitcher of Zach Wheeler's caliber. So I don't look at that World Series game and the home run to Yordan Alvarez in Houston in the final game of the series as a Jose Alvarado issue. A little bit, obviously, he threw the pitch, but it's more the decision for him to be out there. So that's just how I feel about the moment. Maybe you feel differently. Maybe I'm being too easy on Alvarado, but that's just how I feel as someone who's been in, not obviously major league situations, World Series situations, but seen pitchers throwing really well and get pulled and have crazy stuff like that happen. Collegiate level, semi-pro level. So, yeah, that's just my 2 cents. But what am I going to give him for a grade this year? I'm going to give Jose Alvarado a solid A. The diversity he overcame was huge. The numbers, the best of his career in a lot of cases. You can absolutely make that argument that this was the best season of his career in what's been not a lengthy MLB career, but solid sample size. Throws incredibly hard, strikeout machine, your best lefty reliever, a guy that you got to the point where you could really, really trust out of the bullpen in any situation. And the way it ended does not change the fact that he was amazing for you this year, and you don't get to the World Series without him. So, yeah, Jose Alvarado, you're getting an A in my book for your 2022 player season review. So, yeah, there it is. You got Jose Alvarado's review, and we're going to do our last review with one more bullpen guy tomorrow, and it'll be Sir Anthony Dominguez. So, let's see how the righty version of the strike one, strike two, good luck family ends up doing when I give him his review tomorrow. But here's your player review. And coming up next, we're going to do off the poll. We're going to respond to the poll about Bryce Harper's elbow surgery and the time frame and everything like that. So we'll discuss your thoughts and how you responded to the poll. And then I'll tell you what I would have picked when we get into this next segment as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. All right, can I tell you about my friends over at SimpliSafe? Of course I can. If you thought about securing your home with home security, but maybe even putting it off, you're going to want to listen up literally right now. Locked On MLB listeners, Locked On Phillies listeners can now order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system, the one that I trust my mom and my dog's life with back home in New Jersey at their home. You can get it for 50% off. It's their biggest offer of the year. It doesn't get any bigger than this. We talked about Cyber Monday a little bit earlier in this episode. I just mentioned it. This is the deal that you're going to want to search for. You don't have to wait for a specific day for it. You can get it right now. Over the holidays, property crimes, burglaries, package theft, it goes through the roof because everyone's getting stuff delivered. You're traveling. You got to make sure your home's taken care of so it doesn't ruin your Thanksgiving, your Christmas, all of that good stuff. And SimpliSafe has everything you need. They got sensors for the doors, cameras for the house. They got 24/7 professional monitoring agents. Use Fast Protect technology. So they capture critical evidence, make sure the threat is a real threat, and they'll take care of everything for you immediately. They're incredible to have on your side. It's an awesome product. It's an awesome deal. It's one that I trust personally. And I don't know what more I need to tell you. If you need your house protected, don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. It's their biggest discount of the year. So don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb because there is absolutely no safe like SimpliSafe. Okay, let's do Off the Poll. Now, Off the Poll is a segment, if you're not familiar with it, with it, where I place a poll question up on our Twitter account at LO_Phillies. I retweet it from my personal account at Connor Thomas 975. And you go ahead and respond. And I don't tell you what I'm thinking on Friday. That's when we post it up. We leave it up all weekend. And then on Monday, I'll tell you my thoughts, just so I don't poison the well, if you will. I don't want to affect your opinion like, oh, well, Connor made a good point about this. No, I want to know your opinion because I want the unbiased opinion of the fan base. Unbiased away from my bias, not unbiased. We're all rooting for the Phillies here, right? But our off the poll question for this weekend was, are you upset with how long Bryce Harper waited to get his surgery? Got 66 people responded to this, and 74% of them said no, which I find really, really interesting. I also said no. But in a lot of the conversations I had this past week with people on 97.5 The Fanatic, with people on NBC Sports Philadelphia, so TV and radio folks who follow the team, cover the team, talk about this stuff for a living. A lot of people were very upset that Bryce Harper waited that extra time to get the elbow surgery. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I told you, I'm guaranteeing you it doesn't affect the outcome of the season for the Philadelphia Phillies. We're not going to look back in October and say, hey, the Phillies are screwed because Bryce Harper missed those extra couple weeks worth of games. And by couple weeks worth of games, I mean like 2.5 weeks worth of games. So like 12 to 18 games. And I don't understand with the immediate knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, well, he should have had the surgery sooner. We're going to have a chance to hear from him. We're going to get a chance to know whether or not it was a valid reason for him pushing off his surgery. And for that matter, I don't necessarily agree with this. If I find out he went to like Cancun for 2 weeks rather than getting a surgery, he could have gotten to be back for the team sooner. Well, I'd be slightly annoyed with that. I would be. That's just me. You can't have a deal. But what this tells me is a lot of the fan base wouldn't care even in that instance. Just say, hey, it's Bryce Harper. He's earned the right to do that and handle himself how he will. And I lean much more that way than I do the other way. But yeah, I also would have voted no on this poll. And 26% did say yes. It's not a minute minority. So there are some people out there who are annoyed with this, and we'll see how that shifts as we find out more about why the delay. But just an interesting thought on the fan base. And it seems like the fan base in general is very forgiving of Bryce Harper, very willing to either cut him a break, give him the benefit of the doubt, whatever you want to call that. So that's off the poll and a fun insight into how people are viewing the Bryce Harper injury delay between when he could have gotten surgery, we're assuming he could have gotten surgery, and when he did. Well, that's all for today's Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure your next listen is Locked On Sports Today, the biggest breaking news from all around the sports world. Well, last night, Sunday Night Football, was the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Green Bay Packers. Maybe they're talking about that over there. Hockey news, the Bruins. We don't like Boston, but the Bruins are out to an unreal start. The Flyers have lost 10 straight. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the sports world. Check out Locked On Sports Today. They're available on YouTube, the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts. So go ahead and make them your second listen every day. And thank you again for checking us out here on Locked On Phillies. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, everything you got to do to keep track of all the offseason content we're putting out here on Locked On Phillies. Again, we just cleared 500 subscribers on YouTube, so appreciate everyone who helped me get to that. Let's go to 1,000, huh? Why stop here? And let's keep it rolling as we continue to just enjoy what hopefully will be a very impactful Philadelphia Phillies offseason. I'll talk to you again tomorrow on the next Locked On Phillies.